recording live from count them, three locations. This is Past the Rock. I am Patrick, and as always, I am joined by two of the greatest men, Caesar Lotto Manipulator LCs.
And it's been a while since we last saw you.
It's true. Uh, and also Jacob Bethke.
Exactly. And, secretly we had decided that we were never going to record this podcast again until the Dallas Mavericks had a star white boy on their roster. And then, fuck, it only took us a couple weeks before we were just right back on that. So,
Well,
hey,
Hey, listen, there's no guarantee because you can't trust Nico Harrison to do the right thing.
We will definitely get to some of that and some directives that may have already been laid down publicly for him on that one. But yeah, we're back. Lots happened. We're not gonna get to everything. Don't worry about it. We're gonna get to what's important right now, or most important that we might have missed. So without further ado, we're gonna kick off the first quarter.
Hold 'em up.
I should have made some kind of graphic when I was coming up with this idea, but I just came up with the idea.
Do it in post.
Listen, it's just gonna be Roman Reigns holding up the one.
Ooh, not a bad idea. And then you know what? I got.
Yeah, I don't have one for a one other than the
Jason Kidd. Did he
Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange is the number 4.
No, he does there's only one chance. How many opportunities?
Oh wait, I'm thinking of Mr. Fantastic. Sorry.
No, and then the 4 is the 4. You got to do the football one. That one's easy because all the football teams.
Every college football team ever, yeah. I don't know if the NFL teams do it.
No, I don't think you're allowed to have fun in the NFL.
It is the no fun league. And that's gonna come later. We have a lot on the no fun league, and it's gonna be in our second half tonight. But first and foremost, we're gonna kick off. I'm gonna quickly pass the rock to Jacob to help walk us through a step down retirement.
Well, a changing of the guard, no doubt.
Yeah.
A little surprising in the way it happened. So that's what I find the most interesting and want to talk the most on. But this is a pretty big one overall. So Greg Popovich is officially retired as the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs. Now, I guess retired is the right word. It is technically a step down, resignation, or step up, really.
But
it's really,
all that.
It's step back. It's a step back if you think about it.
Yes.
So, but we got to go back 30 years. But back in the day, this was the position that Greg Popovich held. Correct? I believe it was director of basketball ops. Then.
So he was an assistant coach originally, and then Red McCombs fired everybody. So Pop went to Golden State for a bit, and then when what are they called? The Holtz. When they bought the team, they hired Greg back as general manager, and I think whatever executive president of basketball.
The double title. Not everybody does double title, but a good chunk of the teams do double title.
Who knows what it was called in 1994? So,
well, especially back then, it was a lot of double titles. Now we have more like you have in Philadelphia, where there's 2 superstar GMs more or less running the team together.
He was general manager and vice president of basketball operations.
Got you. And nowadays you would have a split where you have vice president of operations would be like Daryl Morey, and Elton Brand would be the GM in Philadelphia. There's these different ways to do it. Why people like it or not is beyond me. But
and for context, for anyone, how long ago that was, Dominique Wilkins was still playing basketball when Greg Popovich came back to San Antonio to.
Well, hey, and if you guys want to look at Nick's history, he was out there playing hoops for another 7 years after he left the NBA too. But yeah, so Greg Popovich has retired, something we've talked about, speculated, even maybe wished, not like in a negative way.
No, just it seemed like it was the right move.
Yeah, just let's not string this out into the next season kind of thing, especially because when we get to the next chapter, the second quarter, I believe, is where we're doing it here. There's a huge, moment of opportunity here for the San Antonio Spurs this offseason. So Greg Popovich took the right timing, whatever it is. This was a good moment to do it. and obviously he steps back into the position he once had. Which was what we theorized. We never really worried about a possibility of him being without basketball. And we've really talked about the family stuff as it is. As a coach, I think it's been pretty clear to see him take a step back over the last however many years, being more of a mentor role, more of the CEO guy.
Letting Becky and Tim Duncan actually coach games.
Literally coach games. I mean, he bent the rules and played with them in ways that I appreciate because, it's not going to be something all 30 teams can do.
Look, if Mark Cuban's going to suit Tony Romo up for warm-ups, Greg Popovich is going to bend the rules for something a little bit more productive.
No, and that's exactly the point of this. And maybe it's helped San Antonio find their next coach for the future.
So we all knew that once he did that, they were ready to, they weren't going to drag that out.
I was a little on the other side of that. I was hoping that they would at least entertain because they were blessed with such a plethora of options this offseason.
I think they did. They just made their decision and then announced everything.
Well, I think they did the Spurs thing. I think that there was no way that they weren't going to bring Mitch Johnson back because he had done a good job. They like to bring people up. He had been groomed for this position clearly. We all knew that at any moment the lead assistant could be the guy for a while now.
I worry that it could just be they think of it as he's a good bridge guy.
And that's a part of it, but I think that's where we get into it. And I'm not going to step on that because it's really what the meat of the second quarter is about.
Sure.
Is both of the lottery drastically changed the way that 2 out of the 3, maybe all 3 Texas teams are going to operate moving forward, right? And in incredible ways. I mean, really in a way that could set up a Texas trifecta for quite a while. Which is incredible to think because, just a few months ago, Luka had been traded. Wemby's got blood clots and the world looks like it's over. Pop's got another medical issue. It's an interesting world to see. But before we get into the rest of that, Pop. Yeah. I mean, this guy is trailblazed everywhere he's gone. I don't need to speak up for his politics because they do themselves. I think he led the league a lot of times in that reaction to anything in the world. That's drawn the ire of a lot of people, which I also think is funny because the Spurs are such a MAGA-ass, patriot, conservative ass team to root for if you really wanted to be about it. But
they're connected to the military base pretty heavy with promotions and all that.
There's a lot of it, and then the way they play basketball is very militaristic. Pop has always said that. It's always been a part of it because it literally is a part of his life.
That's what sports came from. At least a
lot of life, came from that part of the military help basketball
formations and maneuvers.
And so. I've always thought the Spurs and Greg Popovich hold a funny place because he's just chosen to basically piss all over that cash cow, frankly, that a lot of people in his position don't choose to even get close to because the illusion of being the old man white coach that coaches the disciplined basketball team and the blah, blah, blah. He could have really played into a character that we've seen in America over and over and over again. And instead, he did the antithesis because that's who he was. And I think that's probably the best way to summarize Pop the person and what he gave. As a coach, I think it's just hilarious. I mean, you get
it's obvious.
You get the funniest guy in the world and the scariest guy in the world in the same person. That's pretty incredible. And I think for everybody, that's not even just the players. He's notorious for yelling at Duncan just as much as anyone else.
I was going to speak to that as part of. It kind of shows part of who he is as a person and as a coach, which was he's not just some guys will dog cuss and will yell at the smaller guys on the team, but not touch the money guys. And you still think of them as hard asses. But he was true. Just everyone's on this team and everyone's going to be treated the same way. Look at how I treat potentially the best player in basketball history kind of type player.
And Pop is really always, done it with a level of dignity that I think people that don't respect. Like Pop
Yeah,
earns the ability to do that.
he's not
You know, yeah,
disrespecting you as a man. He's just talking about what you did on the basketball court.
yeah. He's holding you accountable on the court because, unfortunately, or fortunately, however it works, it's just the way that his coaching style comes across. Now, you could argue that maybe that style of coaching has started to become outdated in the modern world, but you know, that's a whole different philosophy and stuff. For
I
um,
mean, I think that just has to do with what do your players respond to, because some guys probably still do want and need a fire lit from somewhere. So
yeah, I would say it's the conversation's got more nuanced. I think back in the day it was just this is what you deal with or you don't, you know, and now
yeah,
it's you have way more nuance. Um, so yeah, I mean Pop is as an X's and O's guy, time and time again, has delivered. I think the only blip on the resume is the infamous Tim Duncan sub in the finals in the 13 finals. But you know,
that yeah. I mean, look,
basketball gods had spoken.
you can't win everything all the time,
No,
and they came back the next year.
and yeah, I've often argued. I think
These guys came back, and
and I've often argued that I think that we got to see a much more enjoyable Spurs team than we ever would have, even if they won the
and
13th title. Or
isn't that what you look for, like in your sports movies? Is that they redeem themselves?
yeah, and especially because
It's a great
the
story.
it was especially because they were written off after being a dynasty. You know, there's a lot to that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's
I mean,
you know the maybe the most impressive thing of all the things is he's right up there with what the Patriots did, with what the Red Wings did in hockey, of just 20 years of sustained success.
and I also like Bill Belichick, also like some of these others, tried to extend it to the third decade, didn't quite get there, but because the way that things work out, you can see how this may have turned
Father
that direction
Father
had he been
Time
able to.
remains Father Time remains undefeated, but I think
Yeah,
he didn't leave him I hate to do this, like how Tom Landry was when Jerry had to go and put him down.
yeah, well, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. He definitely
when Jerry
he
had the
actually, you know,
old
yeah.
Yeller
Funny
Tom
enough,
Landry.
I would argue that there's a similarity in that he could have easily done that. Mac Brown is another example of this. I think that at least in my sports fandom, just of guys
It's time.
who time goes by them a little quicker, and I think I've always given Mac credit for acknowledging that in later years. Even though I thought it was hilarious that he got back into coaching after saying that. But with Landry, his system had gotten old, everything had gotten old, and nobody was forcing him to change until they did what they did. Greg, I think, yeah, there's a great possibility that a lot of his philosophy on X's and O's and a lot of things about basketball changed to a point where maybe even it was beyond his comfort level. Um, but at the same time, you can see where a young Mitch Johnson, very young Mitch Johnson, was the one being trained ready. And if it wasn't Mitch, it would have been Becky. If it wasn't Becky, it would have been Taylor Jenkins. If it wasn't Taylor Jenkins, it would have been
Tim
Budenholzer.
Duncan.
Well, Duncan, I think Duncan enjoyed his time, but I think
I
it
think
was clear he was never
he's
going to
got
do
the perfect role in the organization.
it. Yeah. Well, now he's more or less Michael Finley for sure.
And he was
Because now
always
he's,
quietly going to practices and working with guys, here and there, not just all the time being there, but
but
he's
now it
never been a
seems like,
stranger, and I
and
like
this is
that.
yeah, and this is kind of the one thing I didn't bring the clip, and I don't think you clipped it.
The El Jefe thing.
The El Jefe thing was awesome, but I think that's the hardest part of the whole thing was that, I mean, it wasn't even like Greg Popovich had an option. Like that was not someone who was able to coach basketball.
Oh no, I thought he was going to look a lot worse with how recent this
Yeah,
break
that's
was.
fair. I mean,
So
that's fair. It's just
he couldn't move his left arm, and obviously spinning around in a circle wasn't easy. But I've seen
no, yeah,
people
yeah.
much younger and much worse off. So
The spirit was there. The spirit of Greg Popovich was there, but it was definitely
so that
tough to finally see
it
that
was
much aging.
it was encouraging to me that this wasn't like we're not going to actually see him and now he's gone and
Yeah,
that type of
yeah.
thing.
And like I said, I think this was also the way that we get the longest like run with Greg Popovich as well, is to take the responsibility of traveling and leading a basketball team off of his shoulders.
Yeah, just the waking up and traveling sounds so terrible.
Just seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Mitch Johnson, this is the last part of this, unless you have any other Greg Popovich stories or anything else.
I mean, you know, he's a legend. I don't need to. There are gonna be so many better not eulogies, but you know what I mean, to his career. That'll be a lot more eloquent than anything I'm gonna put in. But he's been a huge part of my life. You know, he's been the coach since I was 3 of my favorite basketball team. So it's tough to see him go, but I'm happy he's going out on pretty good terms. Honestly, as best as you can expect from anyone in that job.
Consensus 1B, 2, 3 at worst coach of all time, I would say.
And, you know, that's all subjective. There's no.
Yeah, that one's a tougher one to get to for sure.
You can count rings. And that gets tough.
Yeah.
Red it's just no one's ever gonna. The game will never be that. So.
Well, and Red didn't get a lot of those as coach. So actually, I don't even know. I think Red probably still has more as a coach than Pop, but Red didn't get all of those as coach. Bill actually,
Bill was
Bill Russell,
player coach for a bunch.
Bill
of
Russell would actually be the coach who won a couple of the last 3 of those championships, something like that.
And, you know, obviously Phil's in the discussion. Phil didn't.
Phil is probably most people's,
which is probably the thing that you could say Pop did that's maybe more impressive, that he did it in one city and made it reworked it, retooled it.
I think there's a lot of different ones too. Like I think Steve Kerr is going to have a continued run at this. You know, as he goes. I think if the Miami Heat can land a big fish again, I still think Eric Spoelstra will continue to.
Spoelstra's really good now, the longest tenured coach in the NBA.
Yeah.
I think Rick Carlisle is sneaky, really.
Carlisle's, I mean, we'll get to the playoffs, but Carlisle is certainly making an argument.
Especially if he can add one. Yeah, if he can add one in Indiana, then
I think Carlisle is locking in his Hall of Fame coaching resume with this run. I don't think he's getting close to GOAT coach.
Man, winning a title with Indiana.
It's tough because you do have to factor in what the Mavericks were or were not doing throughout the latter years of Dirk's career, but they did go about a decade without winning a series. So that doesn't make it look great. But yeah, this last couple of years in Indiana has certainly reminded you. And of course, he would have probably taken that Pacers team to a championship, maybe even won it, had the malice in the palace not occurred. So Rick Carlisle is certainly an interesting coach in this conversation. But yeah.
I mean, Nelson's got some, as far as actually bringing changes to the game itself as a coach.
Yeah, and that's tough because then Doug Moe was not very successful. You know, that's the tough one. And there's some D'Antoni. D'Antoni might be the most successful in that regard, and he didn't win anything. In fact, he was like a complete loser most of the time. Wyatt Langford, baby boy. Anyway, Greg Popovich retired. We're gonna miss him, but we're glad that he's still in capacity to be able to be around the team. And we're interested to see what Mitch Johnson does with the team. We'll move into roster side of this later. My question I have moving forward, what assistants come to the staff? It seems obvious that Mike Budenholzer will be one because I don't suspect Budenholzer will get another head coaching job this run. However, there's also Mike Brown, Mike Malone, Taylor Jenkins, all still sort of needs to be shuffled. I'm not sure how many coaches are even going to be fired in the NBA this year.
They just will literally fire them at any point. So
they can. I don't think so. You know what's funny though? I think by now we would have known, and there's nobody even other than because Memphis has already promoted that guy too. Yeah, so there might still be one left, but I don't even know how many jobs are going to be open this year, which is actually a very strange coincidence. I don't know how many times that's ever happened. So look for the staff to get bolstered in case Mitch Johnson isn't the guy for the next big step that they might take. We will know. So that is us saying farewell to Greg Popovich. We hope we did it some justice. I would say my final words are, go to YouTube after this, pause it, go to a different tab, whatever you need to do, and enjoy some Greg Popovich smartass compilations. And also just know that even though, yes, you're going to find many, many clips of him being a very huge asshole to reporters, that he was usually also very, very nice to them off camera. And that's what we call a bit. Okay. They're enjoyable, they're funny, and he did actually hate the NBA for making him do those. So the bit was sort of a way for him to do it without actually taking it out on the people directly impacted by the league's decision making. I think that's the best way to summarize that. I don't think he actually was ever hated those people. Maybe Craig Sager sometimes. I'm not sure. Craig Sager, that was a weird one.
That's just two guys doing a bit where one's bit is to just lay into the other guy, and the other guy's bit is to be a punching bag. So
Yeah, we know why Craig Sager was a punching bag, because apparently he wasn't taking no L's in his personal life. He was doing whatever the fuck he pleased. But anyway, this isn't about that.
playoffs.
This is about the
Playoffs.
playoffs. We have missed a lot. I went and checked my notes from the last time we spoke, and there was about 3, maybe 2 to 3 games played at most in each.
I was gonna say, were the play-ins even done?
We had gotten that far, but that was as far as we had gotten. So we're gonna do a speed run here of the first round. Then we'll get a little bit slower on the second round to quite get that in there, but mostly try to get this through quickly. Oklahoma City beat the crap out of the Grizzlies. That was a sweep. It was a little closer than it might appear. Ja Morant got hurt in the third game when the Grizzlies were up. Grizzlies ended up losing the fourth game by 2 points. So, shout out to the Grizzlies for at least throwing some punches back.
And how do you think they feel about beating the Mavericks? We'll get to that.
I don't know if they had the same pick odds, because you have to remember that there was also a tiebreaker with Chicago's situation that we had to get into there. So the Grizzlies...
It does feel like a crappy prize for being a better team.
Oh, yeah. The Golden State Warriors needed 7 games to take the Rockets down. It looked like that was going to be a series the Warriors could have taken down earlier. Fred VanVleet went into his old ways and fucked up Golden State one last time. If you guys remember, he won the 2019 title, probably as like the third best player on that team, second, depending on the night. And he was huge. And that was the first year they were in San Francisco, if you remember. So he, got to be great for that fan base to remember that little dude coming in there and torturing them last time and then coming around and doing it again. Warriors would win it in 7, though, back in Houston. Minnesota, LA. That one could have been more interesting and would have been more talked about had we been in the moment. But now that one's certainly funnier to think about in retrospect, blah, blah, blah. Ultimately,
the forgotten series of the West this year.
But, I mean, we were talking, there was so much talk about the Lakers being a dark horse, right? So we know that was hype. And we know that was hype. I told you guys that the depth of this team was just going to be too much to overcome. You said that LeBron and Luka can control games. You don't want to bet against that. I thought that's fair. Minnesota was a possible series they could win because Minnesota had been very disjointed. We know Julius Randle can kind of get into a really goofy version of basketball. At the same time, Ant might be pressing too much, and then all of a sudden Minnesota explodes. Well, the exact opposite happened. Minnesota's played flawlessly for the most part this playoffs, and they forced JJ into basically 5-man rotations for the last 2 games, and they snuffed out the Lakers pretty well. Probably even could have won the one they lost, but the Lakers won the rock fight essentially. So yeah, Luka and the Lakers continue to be an interesting storyline, but one that will have to wait for a few months. Clippers and Nuggets gave us probably the best series of the entire first round, maybe of the last few years. Kawhi Leonard went absolutely fucking nuts. The Clippers absolutely looked like they were about to take control of the series, and then Aaron Gordon pulled out some heroics.
Just the most Clippers speed run possible.
It was, and then the worst part was game 7.
Clippers. The old Clippers wouldn't even be in the playoffs, so this is a good.
It's a step up.
Trending,
but they're still here, and I think what's worse than the Clippers living to their history was that James Harden specifically lived up to his. This game was close. The game 7 was close. It was an obtainable one, and it was one that James Harden was not good in whatsoever. Yet again.
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
Incredible, honestly. I would say almost jaw dropping because this really felt like the opportunity for James Harden to at least somewhat rewrite that. And maybe even, I mean, if they win that series, the Clippers might be the most, um, it might be the more popular team to come out of the West right now as we stand. But alas, here we are. Jumping over to the East side. The Cavs beat the brakes off the Heat. Was it too easy? I think time might have told us that it was. There were some injuries they were dealing with, so it wasn't the worst thing in the world. Fortunately, we'll get to the Cavs. Boston sort of lazily got through the Magic in a gentleman's sweep. Again, hindsight is 2020, but maybe Jason Tatum doesn't play a couple of those games when he was injured, and maybe that one goes to 6, and maybe that one's something that's something you would have swallowed. But again, hindsight's 2020, and we'll get to why that's so true.
You just can't play those games.
It's tough, but I do think that that's the argument people usually make in these is that be safe. Like if you're that good of a team and you're playing,
I
that
don't mean he
inferior
shouldn't have played
opponent.
the games. I mean us looking back on it, we shouldn't play that game with ourselves of
Could have.
predicting injury. It's tough.
No, it's not. But I think again, forcing him, feeling like you needed to force your best player back in a winnable series is going to get back to my frustrations with Joel Mazzulla.
And we'll touch on some of that in the Stars talk at the very end of this show as well.
Nice. So yeah, Tatum sort of forces himself back, not 100% in that series. They end up winning in a gentleman's sweep. The Knicks end up having probably one of the more interesting series of this whole playoff run with the Pistons. Frisky little Pistons team full of a bunch of veterans that want more money, and Cade Cunningham who wants his damn respect, and I think he earned that permanently now. They did lose this one in 6. Obviously, they were the worst team in like basketball history last season. So I think for them losing 6 in the team that I'm about to talk about might be the eventual NBA champion, that's a pretty cool uptick for the Pistons. I think that series left me with one question. Who is the more valuable former Maverick right now? Luka or Jalen Brunson?
Kristaps ain't no slouch either, but right now it's Jalen.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, Jalen's has an opportunity here.
Because he's in the East, it's
because they are now in the
swing that
driver's
D
seat. I
a
mean,
little bit better, yeah.
we'll get to that, but they're in the driver's seat. Actually, they're basically there now. So we got to talk about the Pacers. We got to get into some Pacers talk here because they're going to finish our first round, and then we're going to use them for the second round as well. Pacers first round handled the Bucks in 5. All right. We thought it was a good series for them to jump out early on, and they did. Dame Lillard was not able to play. He comes back for game 3. The Bucks win it. All of a sudden, we think, okay, maybe the Bucks are fine. Game 4, he tears his Achilles. Now we think, oh shit, the Bucks franchise is completely ruined. And here we are. The Pacers move forward, and we're going to spend a lot of the lottery talk talking about how important that is to Giannis' future. So life comes at you fast, Milwaukee.
At least they got theirs.
They did. At least they got theirs. Leading us into the second round, where we now have the Pacers already advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals. This is the second time in back-to-back years. Rick Carlisle now.
I was going to say, it's the first time ever that a 4 seed has done it, I think. Is that what I heard? A 4 seed or below, maybe?
No, because that dumbass Cavs team went to the finals.
In back-to-back years?
Oh, in back-to-back years.
Yeah.
Got you. Then yes,
They've done
that's
it,
most
yeah.
likely a new thing because the statistical likelihood of that happening is not high at all. So the Pacers, as a 4th seed, we're going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals again. Darius Garland misses game 1. That definitely helped the Pacers. Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, and DeAndre Hunter missed game 2. That definitely helped the Pacers.
Oh, yeah.
Then the Cavs looked like they were going to get back in the series. That didn't really happen. Even last night, it looked like the Cavs were about to lock in an extra game. They were at home last night, so it was like, okay, out of respect for our fans, we're going to win this one, and then Indiana's probably going to close it off back at home. Well, fourth quarter came, and a collapse came, and now the Cavaliers are singing 1, 2, 3 Kangaroo.
They're wearing point guard hoodies.
Point guard hoodies, yeah, they're done.
Which I don't really know what don't know what he meant by that one, but
I don't understand what's happening with these guys. I mean, clearly they feel like we undervalued them, and then they showed up, but then after they got a real test, we were actually right the whole time about them, and then now they're mad at us for being right. And so like, we're just at a point where I feel for them. I think the best thing that came out of this was Donovan Mitchell talking about we own the city. We're going to come back for this city. If you're a Cavs fan, you're at least happy to hear Donovan Mitchell talking about it.
They're set up positively for the future.
Yeah, and I think maybe this just kills the two big man lineup. You know, I think they're not going to move on from Evan Mobley. I would be surprised if they did, but Jared Allen most likely maybe at that point, or maybe there is a deal where Evan Mobley means something more to a different franchise. But you know, his talent being so high, I think that would be really foolish to give up on Evan Mobley, and I would probably go ahead and move on from Jared Allen at that point. Ty Jerome also had been a big story for them this season. 6th Man of the Year candidate. Maybe would have won if Peyton Pritchard hadn't been so dominant and the Celtics hadn't been so dominant. But ultimately, he ended up sort of being a bit of a Cinderella story in the playoffs, where that didn't translate the way you would want it to. As the decks get shuffled, as rosters slim down, he got cut, you know, more or less. So, or he was very negative and might as well have been sat down. So, you know, you got to make some roster decisions. I still like the moves they made. I still like their future, but yeah, it's probably time to shuffle the deck a little bit more and figure out the right way to actually contend with Donovan Mitchell, who played amazing, by the way, in the final game. Played absolutely incredible. Was hurt. Didn't even seem like he was going to play last night. Ended up almost single-handedly getting in that game. So, still an incredible game for them. Pacers ahead. Their rival, or whoever they're going to be facing, their opponent, we don't know quite yet. As we speak, that's 59-59 in Game 5 of the series. The Knicks are up 3-1 over the Celtics, which, if you don't know anything about what's been happening, and you just only knew that the Celtics have been the best team in basketball, you're probably like, what the fuck?
Well, was it Game 1 where the Celtics missed like 3,000 threes?
So basically what's happened is 2 parts. The basketball gods have chosen to be very wrathful towards Joe Mazzulla. Very, very wrathful. And personally, I think he needs to watch his tone about the way he talks to us, but more importantly, the way he talks about basketball games, okay?
Yeah.
Because the gods were listening, and the gods were not happy with him. So I get it. We're in a 3-point revolution. I don't love that people take a lot more threes than they used to, because I don't think it's as beautiful in ways. I get that. I have seen the differences. I'm not saying they don't exist. I also see the advantages because guys are better. I understand all these things. But what we know is the Golden State Warriors were able to utilize this to great success because of ball movement and team basketball, as much as it was the 3. The Houston Rockets failed miserably with this formula because it was ISO heavy and incredibly redundant and predictable. And as a result, the shooting variance was easier to throw off, in my opinion, which caused the infamous 0 for 27. I think almost everybody agrees that that's the happy medium you have to have. So when the Celtics came out last year and basically were doing more or less a 2-man dance version of, like, it was sort of it was sort of a mix of the two. It was a little more ISO heavy than what the Warriors would be doing, but it wasn't quite James Harden one-on-one every single trip down the court either, right? So I liked it. I didn't hate it. It was fine. This year, we're starting to see it being tested. We're starting to see the holes that it has. We're starting to see the issues with it. What is Joe Mazzulla's response? To be a big fucking prick in his press conferences and be a crybaby and tell me, oh, shooting variance is going to go back our way. You mean we missed? They made open shots? Good for them. fuck you, dude. Come on, bro. You were like, this guy has always got the biggest stick up his ass. Like, he's God's gift to basketball. And, like, bro, you're about to be fired in within a year or two. I'm just saying. Fuck.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, he took that one. He took that one deep to left.
it's all right. We got Corbett on the mound. You know what I mean? He's as long as you give him some runs, he'll be all right. Okay, so either way, games 1 and 2 should have been wins for the Celtics. At least you split the series. Instead, they double down on stubbornness and they go down 0-2 in this series. Okay, they go to New York. Guess what, Joey Maz? Shooting variance back on your side. You get the win you say. Now you get to do your press conference. You get to dance on our grave. See, I'm confident. I know what's going on. All right, game 4 comes. Shooting variance falls back in the way of, hey, the Knicks are just this really good defensive team. And yes, they don't play a lot of guys, but this is a really talented defensive roster for the most part. And they're kind of one of the smartest defensive minds in basketball history. It's not that plausible that they're going to force you out of playing in your comfort zone. Adjust. Somewhat that happened. But ultimately what happened in the fourth quarter of the last game was Jason Tatum trying to deadlift the Boston Celtics in a very lackluster offense until the unfortunate happened. And I do want it to be noted that the Knicks had already basically regained the momentum in the closing minutes of the game by the time that Jason Tatum's injury happened. But of course, Jason Tatum did get a torn Achilles and is now probably going to be out for the remainder of the next 2 seasons, more or less.
Yeah, it's on top of it being a bad injury, just the timing of it makes it that much more valuable of an injury. If that's impactful, probably.
And so, tonight they're in Boston. It's probably a game they can win, extend this thing to 6. But I think it's going to be very difficult for them to be able to pull out this series, let alone this title. I think they had to start Luke Cornett over Kristaps Porzingis just now, which is maybe arguably a good idea. The new ownership wants to cut money already, so now you're without your best player going into next season. So there's a lot of questions for the Celtics. Obviously, at this point, they're still alive. They have the talent to survive a game, but the Knicks fans haven't seen an opportunity like this in 30 years, man. So that place is going to be loud and ready to roll. And so that game 6 might be one of the hardest game 6s ever to go into, especially undermanned and especially with a coach as stubborn as yours. The West is more interesting, but also not, maybe potentially. I don't really trust any of these 4 teams, and I don't want to pick any of them to win the championship. Wolves have the Warriors dead to rights right now. Curry went down with the hamstring injury in game 1. Kids got their lick back in game 2 to tie it, and then the Warriors' offense has just basically died in the last 2 games. And at this point, I would be pretty surprised if they can extend tonight. If they do, there is likely a Steph Curry at the end of the rainbow for them. But it's a hamstring issue, so how much Steph Curry, what kind of Steph Curry? Yeah. But I will say, if they just have Steph Curry standing in the corner and shooting, it'd be better than what they got right now.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not.
Their
great.
offense has been fucking awful the last 2 games. Awful.
How often do you get a 6 versus 7 in the playoffs?
It's not good, but it's been, oh my god. And maybe we're not appreciating the Wolves defensively enough, but the Wolves are an incredibly beatable group, and we're not seeing the best opportunity for them. I think the Wolves have the opportunity in the next series, obviously, should they be able to close the Warriors out. And again, I assume that tonight the Warriors are going to go down. I just don't think they have enough offensive power to even get it to 6 to have a chance at 20 minutes of Curry standing in a corner, So yeah. Thunder hold the slight edge over the Nuggets in the other series. This one's been fun. This one could go 7. Ultimately, I'm not sure that it will, though. It feels like the Nuggets are running on empty for the most part. Nicola's been incredible. Aaron Gordon's been incredible. you get incredible days out of Jamal Murray, out of Russell Westbrook, out of Michael Porter Jr., but they're never super consistent in any of those times.
Well, we won at least one of those games where Jokic really wasn't the best player on the court, which is surprising. You would think.
Until last night, he had not been, until last night, he had not been.
Game one, was he not absolutely dominant?
Offensively, he had not really been a dominant player since, I think, midpoint of the Clippers series.
Which I would have said is the only way they would win any game. So it was kind of surprising to see they sort of figured some things out.
The Nuggets have done a great job with what little they have. But again, their depth is way too little. Like they are stressed. They are running out of gas. They have control. They probably would have already been either in control of or have already won this series if they had at least one or two other players. They are exhausted, and they're playing a young team that can go honestly 8 or 9 guys and trust in the playoffs 8 or 9 guys. Now, I'm not going to say they're going to give you all the best minutes in the world, but at least guys that you can trust to stay on the court for 5-minute breathers for your good guys, Nuggets don't even have that. So ultimately, I do think the Thunder will come out of the West because of this. And they'll definitely come out of this series, in my opinion. Nikola Jokic is an incredible basketball player. I'm excited for the Nuggets' future because I still think there is one there. I just think that they also need to go back to the drawing board. It's similar to the Warriors. I feel bad because I think the Warriors with a healthy Curry may have been more interesting. But at this point, go back to the drawing board. I think the Thunder are still going to lose to which. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty confident I know who's going to win the NBA championship at this point. But the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Minnesota Timberwolves are high variability. They have the talent levels to do it. I just don't necessarily trust them. The Knicks may not seem like the most logical candidates. And yes, they are one injury away from completely out of this.
Most teams are, though.
But I really think the Knicks have a formula and an opportunity here. And I would be stunned if they don't win the championship, given what they have. Now, obviously,
assuming they stay healthy, right?
Assuming they stay healthy. And, honestly, it would go a long way for them to close out today in Boston. If they can pull that off, that shows a lot. But I thought the Pistons series was such a good one for them to wake up, to gel as a team for the first time this season for real. And they did. And then they've taken this Boston challenge again and again and again. And so I really think Thibodeau's got a hell of a group for it. And I wouldn't have thought they'd win this title if everyone's healthy, if everyone's playing at their best. But the way things have shaken out, I think they got it. I think they can do it with 6 guys.
This is wild.
More or less 7, basically 6. All right. NBA lottery.
All right, we're gonna do a
check
quick
the name.
Little this.